Tangle and Whisper Miniseries Issue 3. Ugh, I've been moving ahead in the video, and I cannot believe how long her past flashbacks are going to go on for. A ridiculous amount of time where in the present day, all they're doing is just sitting there talking to each other while Mimic's getting away. Okay, she was in an anti-Eggman mercenary team. She wasn't a gang member, so she was technically with a group of freedom fighters. It's confusing because mercenary has constantly been used in the Sonic series as another word for criminal, which just makes me wonder why they're suddenly too terrified to say the word criminal. Bean and Bark are supposedly mercenaries. Whisper shows Tangle a photo that she's nice enough to say they look cool in. Too bad I can't relate to that because most of the characters in it look like bad DeviantArt OCs, making it impossible to take them seriously. The brown colored one is the only one with a design that's kinda decent. But I can't tell what animal he's supposed to be. I can't tell what any of them are supposed to be. Having wacky colors for them just makes them look like a DeviantArt artist was trying too hard to make them look special, which doesn't make them special. I was hoping we got past this kind of amateurish character design after the reboot was done. Slinger was her marksman. Oh, what a convenient name for a marksman. Was she named that by her parents, or was that a nickname? I guess they're all nicknames, because otherwise that'd be really convenient for how they ended up. Their psyop was called Clairvoyance. Whisper was the scout, and Smithy was their crafter, and Mimic was their infiltrator. Why did Mimic have to have horrible looking black and white eyes? I don't know what they were going for with that character design. Sure, he's a bad guy, but not all bad guys have to look like that. She says that she thought her friends were all committed to the cause, but they weren't. That directly reminds me of the original Freedom Fighter story by Romy Chacon, where the snake betrayed the team and got them all roboticized. This isn't original either. I've seen that before too. Granted, it won't lead to Whisper's friends being roboticized in the end, but it's still feeling like the same concept again. Whisper gives Tangle a mask that conveniently has a video of the missions she did with her gang. What made anyone in universe think that recording the missions would be necessary? Ugh, I don't care. I really don't want to read this because it's going to be focused on new characters I'll have no reason to care about, as the whole plot about chasing Mimic will come to a screeching halt. But if I don't fully talk about this, I won't be able to find out any of the plot holes in it. I won't be able to find all the times these characters were complete idiots. If that's the only motivation I have to not skip entire scenes of a story, the story has failed to keep interest. I've already read the original Freedom Fighter story. I have more reason to like those characters because they looked a lot better. They all looked like a specific species. I hate that we're being forced to see the story from the first-person perspective of various characters in the stories, while the whole time there's a text box saying, Smithy, playback, or whatever. It's just visually distracting that this unnecessary text box is in every panel and taking up comic space. And when I'm bored with the story as it is, every new problem forces me to take up even more time in the story explaining it, even if it's a minor one. I don't care at this point. It starts with the first mission in media res. At least it's fast pacing, but it's also disorienting. It's already having a hard time getting me to care as it is. I don't know their plan and what's going on, so I've even less reason to be invested. At least with the original Freedom Fighters, we saw them make a plan before they went to Eggman's base. Claire's asked to use her clairvoyance to find out where the patrols are. And clearly it would have been a lot more interesting to actually see what she's talking about, instead of seeing one little panel of an unappealing looking character. And then it switches to the perspective of Mimic for no reason. Why would it be like that? Why would Whisper make it like that, instead of just being from her perspective? She must have gone out of her way to edit the footage together, instead of just having it be from her perspective. Smithy says to blow down the door and wants to tear down everything in here. Well, it is sympathetic of them to want to spite Eggman. This isn't a way to show off their personalities. They don't seem to have any personality traits other than they want to fight Eggman, which makes them seem redundant. At least Bunny had a southern accent to add to that. This is even more boring. You get the audience attached to characters by showing their personalities, and the unique way they interact with their various friends. Sadie M did a better job with that with its first episode. These guys seem no more different in personality than the various town militias. So a tower gets destroyed. Why can't she just say destroyed instead of neutralized? I've already seen a tower get destroyed with Saffron around in Archie. I can't help but be annoyed by how formal Claire's dialogue is. As if motivating myself to read all of the dialogue wasn't hard enough. At least none of the Archie Sonic miniseries had multiple scenes in a row where there was no focus on the main character at all, and it was just OCs taking over the story. The closest they ever came to that was the Tales miniseries. But at least the scenes with the Australians didn't take place in the past. So they seemed like they were doing something relevant, that you'd have a reason to care about. Because it might actually affect Tales at some point, and it did. And they actually looked good. Whisper says they're all clear and can leave, and Tangle tells Whisper she was amazing. Then out of complete nowhere, it turns out one of the wisps beside Tangle can talk. Huh? If the wisps near Whisper were able to learn how to speak English, what took them so long to reveal this? Tangle fortunately explains what could have been a continuity error. As it turns out, Whisper's mask translates the language of the wisps to English. Who made that mask? Tails? It better be explained how such advanced, convenient, and clearly unnecessary technology came to light. It'd make more sense for magic to do this. This just seems like it's wasting time in the story. Especially if it'll never be referenced again. Whisper says that go figure, Smithy was a genius. And he designed their masks and wisp-ons. So Whisper's not a genius. Some random OC who never needed to exist is. Great, so just like I assumed, Whisper getting to be a genius gadgeteer would be too good of an idea to be used. Because that'd give her more than just one personality trait. Smithy is such a blaringly cliche and lazy name for a blacksmith or gadgeteer character. That's literally the name of a blacksmith in A Link to the Past. So Smithy knew how to make a Wisp to English translator. At that point, it would have made more sense if the writer just kept it simple and had him politely ask Tails to make the masks. Because Tails was the only one we saw in the series who is capable of making a Wisp translator. And he made a functioning one really quickly. It would have been a simple matter to ask Tails for his translator and put in the masks. I figured only Tails can make such a ridiculously lucky invention at this present time period. I just learned about Smithy's existence, and already I'm expected to believe that he's just as capable an engineer as Tails. A character we've had far more experience with in the series, when they could have just used Tails for this. That's not going to endear me to that character. You need an endearing personality to make an endearing character. Whisper says that the masks let her teammates communicate and act as one. The variable Wisp-on was meant for all of them to have, and she just has a prototype. So only she has a Wisp-on that can keep any type of Wisp in there. It turns out there's going to be even more padding for us, because Whisper doesn't want to tell Tangle what happened to her friends right away because it's too hard on her. Tangle says that she has to tell her because it's eating her up inside, and asks her to show her the footage so she can help her. Why did there have to be so many panels leading up to this one? We see them at a table playing against Eggman, and Claire tells Whisper to just hang back like she always does. Because while Mimic said they're all needed on the ground for this one, she's got a bad feeling about this. Okay, so she's why Whisper survived. But she somehow didn't know that the others wouldn't survive, and exactly why, and warned them. And it was so inconvenient that she magically didn't know exactly what was going to happen in the future, when she knows things are going to go wrong. She's able to see where the patrols are with her psychic powers, telling them all exact details. But when it comes to the future, oh God forbid she know the exact details there. That'd be scientifically impossible. At least it's better than other M-Comic Amy who knew for a fact that the heroes were gonna die soon before it happened, and did nothing to warn them and prevent it. But still, it doesn't seem like he's very tactful at writing psychic characters. Sure, it's inconvenient that while she has a bad feeling, she doesn't know that Mimic's gonna betray them and doesn't warn her friends about it. You'd think she'd know that her bad feeling is from him. You'd think that would be the one detail that would be crystal clear to her if it's actually a plan he has in the present from her perspective. A plan that he started making in the past. So you'd think she'd have figured it out earlier. It could have very easily been written that Whisper was meant to hang back instead of her being told to by Claire. Or Claire could have been dead at this point. This panel didn't need to exist. Claire says that she can't let this opportunity go to waste, and they should go on the mission anyways. And they just have to be extra careful and try their best. You'd think an experienced psychic who's constantly using her powers would have enough brain cells to trust in any time she has a bad feeling. But I guess she was meant to be an idiot character all along. I've already seen enough of those characters. I want something new. Out of nowhere, Claire's having trouble seeing anything with her psychic powers, and she says that Eggman's projecting alpha waves. As it turns out that Eggman can project magical waves to make a psychic's powers useless. Even though he's about science, not magic. How could science inhibit magic? Did he make the alpha waves with the power of a Chaos Emerald? I guess we'll never know. It's asked where's the security, and Eggman's ready for the team this time. And it turns out the team doesn't think the Resistance could take this place down. But explaining why will be good writing, instead of portraying them as strawmen to make it easier on you what's going to happen to them. So you're just left wondering why they don't respect the Resistance. Never mind that Knuckles and Amy have super strength, and these guys are mostly devoid of special powers. At least our time wasn't wasted some more by Tangle complaining about the Resistance being insulted. So we can assume that she's just thinking it. Claire says the Alpha Waves are the strongest here, so whatever Eggman's hiding is most likely in there. Smithy seems to see a shadow android or metal shadow in a pod. Rather than looking like they're supposed to, they look like the ones from Shadow the Hedgehog multiplayer. Which makes me wonder why they can't even get that right, because this is supposed to be a comic that has the games as canon to it. Then they get sealed into the room. Oh, like how Scales sealed his friend into a room in Eggman's base. And it's the one that looks most obviously evil who betrayed them. Go figure. At least here something different happens. They have to shoot a whole bunch of metal shadows. They don't know where Mimic is when they need evacuation. And we see Eggman congratulate Mimic for doing the smart thing. At least Mimic explains himself instead of being an unbelievable character. Eggman will have control over 99% of the planet in a month, and he'd rather play for the winning team. Although, couldn't he just have a gun, like a knife, and surprise him with a surprise attack? I mean, he's right in front of him. Maybe he wasn't doing the smart thing. Maybe he could have won. I guess he was too cowardly to risk it. Eggman says he'll pardon him for his crimes against him. That's pretty generous compared to Archie Robotnik, who just roboticized Scales too, because Scales just said you can't trust a snake. That was more effective of a villain. Mimic's Wisp ditches him, and Eggman says that the Wisps are more trouble than they're worth anyways. It's pretty odd that he says this, because he almost brainwashed the entire world successfully with them. Which makes me wonder why he didn't try that again. Eggman says that his shadow androids report 3 targets down there, when there were 5 of them. Mimic stutters while saying that Whisper stayed outside as a lookout, and he says that she's no threat. So, first he was being portrayed as a monstrous cartoon villain, but now it seems like he still had some affection for her and wanted her to survive, and only agreed to go finish the job out of fear. And I guess he never really wanted to get them all killed, and would have rather kept at least one of them alive if he could get away with it. Which is why I didn't insist on Whisper being on the ground with them and just humored Claire, which surprised me. Either that or he used to have a crush on Whisper. It's kind of impressive that he cared. We see that in the past, Whisper watched Mimic briefly try to pretend he was one of her friends, only to shapeshift back to normal. And he wonders where Whisper is. He says that if she ran, who knows where she might be. And he says that Eggman's gonna fillet him alive. That sounds like when Flynn wrote an evil tales to say that he's gonna skin Sonic alive in the other M comic. And somehow he got away with it here because he said fillet instead, and Mimic looks like an octopus. Wow. Oh, I guess Mimic's holding the mask and making it face him. He says that he has Whisper's wisp on, and Eggman wouldn't know his mask from hers. So he decides to turn these in as proof to get Eggman off his back. Why doesn't he use a mask to see Whisper's point of view just in case she's still alive and find out where she is? He has a lot of experience with using masks to see from his friend's point of view. So that's a plot hole right there. Whisper explains to Tangle that she had waited until it was all clear and rescued the Wisps, went back to base and took Smithy's prototype. At least her friends weren't unlikable jerks like I expected. They just didn't have personalities at all. No better than the original Freedom Fighters by Romy Chacon. The story just keeps wasting panels on me. Tangle asks Whisper why she held on to that footage. And she says never forget, never forgive. At least that explains it. Tangle says that this is why Whisper took that new Wisp on in the Wisps to keep fighting as a Guardian. It turns out that Guardian Angel wasn't Whisper's idea for a name for herself. After seeing all of this, I don't see how Whisper's backstory was a necessary thing to write. She could have easily just had her wisp on and wisp because she asked Tails for them. It's like the backstory only happened so that they could pad out the miniseries. It turns out that Whisper didn't like looking at Shadow because he reminded her of the Metal Shadows. I assumed it was because he's black and red colored like a stereotypical villain, and he tried to destroy the world in his first appearance. So it would have been realistic that some people would see him like that. That some people wouldn't have forgiven him and wouldn't trust him. Apparently they needed a different explanation, because that was too implausible. Somehow, Tangle still needs to be told why Whisper wants to leave her behind, when it was obvious from the start that she didn't want to lose another friend. I mean, she even shouted "not again" in front of her in an earlier issue when Jewel was about to die. And Whisper's explanation is the exact same one she already gave. Tangle says that she get payback and Mimic won't trick her again. That better last! She helps Whisper stand up, and Whisper hugs her and thanks her. Then we see the past again, where Mimic's holding a hologram generator of Eggman's, telling him to look through every mote and lump to confirm that they're gone when there's nothing left but soot. He says that they would have been atomized, and he doesn't know what proof he wants him to find them. It was less dark when the original Freedom Fighters were roboticized. These ones were outright destroyed. No surprise that a fanfiction writer went darker than he did. I didn't know they were atomized. I thought the Metal Shadows beat them to death, or tore them to death. Eggman says he doesn't trust him because he assured him that Whisper wasn't the threat, when it turns out she's become a destructive beacon of hope in the war. And Sonic gives him enough trouble, so he doesn't need another distraction. Is this taking place during the plot of Sonic Forces? It must be, because that's after Sonic escaped, and he's still giving him trouble, and Eggman wasn't taken down yet. Eggman says that there's no shape Mimic can take that'll protect him from Metal Sonic. He expects that to be a threat? How does Eggman expect Metal Sonic to find him if he could look like anyone? How stupid does he think we are? Of course he'd be protected from Metal Sonic if he doesn't know that he's him. My god, that's dumb of Eggman. Mimic sees that Tangle and Whisper survived the explosion in the vault without injury, and he sees a message on the ground telling him that they'll end this where they started. And that's the end of the issue? This miniseries was by Ian Flynn, so Whisper's past was literally just an excuse to have a third issue in the miniseries. Great. Again, Archie Sonic had 3-issue miniseries, so I thought that was fine. At least our friends weren't horrible, just horrible to look at, so that wasn't too bad. It did feel like another Eggman's Dozen situation where I really had to force myself through it because of how horrible they looked and how apathetic I was to them. Obviously it was pretty dark what happened to them at the end, but I'm already used to dark writing from Ian Flynn by this point. I've already read the Mecha Sally arc, so I'm numb to this. At least Whisper's friends weren't unlikable, but they were completely barren of personality and had terrible designs. The premise of the miniseries was disappointingly unoriginal for the Sonic series, but it was at least more interesting than them fighting Eggman's robots to protect towns again, so it was more interesting than I expected. But the concepts of a shape-shifting villain, a guy trying to ruin Sonic's reputation, and a traitor to a group of freedom fighters have all been done multiple times before, so I wasn't super interested and impressed with that kind of premise at that point.